Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us for this week's panel conversation with law enforcement leaders from around the country. My name is Matt Fulton. I'm the Vice President for National Engagement with an engagement company called Boeke. We work with communities around engagement and help communities assess performance from a resident's perspective. And we put these sessions together really to draw out what communities are finding successful in engaging with their residents as you think about law enforcement services in your community. The idea is to find out what's working in these communities, where the panelists are from. And the hope is that you'll just pick up a new perspective, a new idea, a solution that you might consider. I also hope that you'll gain a better appreciation for the work that is done in the entire area of law enforcement and how police agencies are delivering services to you just to build on the quality of life and enhancing your connection to the community. So I'm really appreciative that you're here. Here's the agenda for today. We're going to be going through a quick introduction of our panelists, and then we will introduce the topic and jump into the questions. I have 3 questions that I'm going to be posing to each of the panelists. And then we'll provide a little bit of an opportunity for a conversation with the panelists, and then we'll wrap it up. Generally, the session takes about an hour. And just really happy that you're taking some time out to participate and listen to this session. So if that's okay, let me go ahead and kick off and introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Chief Heath Scott, who was appointed as the chief of the Haines Police Department in Alaska on July 18th, 2016. Heath has also worked as the Deputy Chief of Police with the DC Protective Services Department in Washington, DC. He's got an extensive amount of training in a multitude of critical public safety areas and has had the opportunity to provide leadership in a broad spectrum of law enforcement assignments. He's a graduate of the FBI National Academy and the Department of Homeland Security Leadership Academy. He's a past board member for the Alaskan Association of Chiefs of Police and is a current member for Small and Rural Law Enforcement Executives Association. It's really an honor to have Chief Scott here as part of this panel, and I'm looking forward to hearing his perspective about how his department is engaging with their community residents and stakeholders in this really weird time, but in a beautiful part of the country. Heath, would you mind just sharing a little bit more about your background? Thanks a lot for spending some time with us.
Thanks very much. Very pleasant introduction. I've been policing for about 25 years, the last 5 years as a chief of police, the previous 10 at the command level above inspector to deputy chief. I came from an agency in the District of Columbia in a major metropolitan city in a very kinetic environment, and chose to move my family to a more rural location here in Southeast Alaska. I live in a community that is extremely rural. It is a bedroom population of 2,500. We are very remote in addition to that. So we are a 40-minute plane ride from Juneau, which is the capital, and a 4-hour ferry ride. We share a border with British Columbia, which is 40 miles away from where I'm at right now. And our community is just under 2,300 square miles. So it's just a gigantic community. And it is absolutely the most beautiful place on this planet. When I came here, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
When I came here, for those of you that are religious, you'll appreciate this. I couldn't not be outside, and I could not repeat these words. I know God exists when there's beauty in the world like this, and to describe it even a little bit further, it's like Switzerland meets the ocean. We have these beautiful 4,000 foot, 5,000 foot peaks that surround us, and we're right on the ocean. And if you're a sportsman, there's no better place in the world to be. It's very old world though. When I came here, I felt like I was going back in time to 1980. The state's relatively young. It was a territory up until the 50s and has only been a state for some 70 plus years. So there's very unique aspects to it. And one of those unique aspects to it is Alaska attracts very independent personalities. And when you hear people talk about Americans in general, culturally, they talk about independence. Alaska is an even stronger independent attitude. If that provides any perspective on the people that we deal with.
I think that is just very cool. And, it's going to be interesting to hear your ideas in the way that you're dealing with engagement. There are some truths. 90% of all communities are under 10,000 in population. So there's generally a smaller community kind of atmosphere. And even though you're in a really unique and beautiful area, I'm excited to kind of hear where there are commonalities in your engagement techniques and where you're doing unique aspects, particularly given the geographic extent of your community. So thanks. I'm really excited for having you here, Heath. So look forward to your participation here.
Thank you, Matt.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce Deputy Shelby Humphries, who works with the Kent County Sheriff's Office. Shelby grew up in Michigan and was a very successful athlete, earning a state high school championship in her high school career. That enabled her to go on to college and earn a college scholarship to Grand Valley State University, where she was a two-time national champion playing soccer. And in between her playing soccer, she ended up getting a degree in criminal justice and sociology, and has been spending the last 6 years working in the law enforcement world. She worked a little while for East Lansing Police Department before joining the county. She has gained a great experience in a whole variety of different areas and is currently working in the community policing unit as a community outreach deputy. Shelby, congratulations on your career, your young career, but all of your accomplishments to date and for the work you're doing. Can you add a little bit more to your background and share a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Kind of when I know we talked a little bit earlier, I feel very blessed to sit in a room as being just a deputy here with my upper command in chief sitting here with me. I kind of grew up with a law enforcement background as I'm a second generation law enforcement, as my dad served at Kalamazoo Public Safety, which is a small town, or I'm sorry, a big city, just south of where I'm at right now, currently in Grand Rapids. A little bit about our police department is in Kent County, we serve about 650,000 people. With that being said, we patrol about 872 square miles that include 21 different townships. So we get a variety of everything. We have where you can be lit up in a city or where you can be out in the country and there are zero lights. So kind of just depending on where you like to work is what you bid on and where you're able to work inside the county. With that kind of in my spare time, I definitely was a huge athlete. My father actually played pro baseball for a little while. So that's kind of, I think, what got me into the athlete world, as well as my mom. I got to contribute some to her as well. She also played in college. She ran track and field. So with that, on my free time, I'm teaching in academies. I currently teach at 2 academies here, which is the KVCC Academy, which is in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and the GRCC Academy, which is in Grand Rapids, where I'm currently at right now. Yeah, I just feel very, very blessed to be here. I'm excited to talk about different just opportunities or what kind of different community outreach everybody does within their respective city or county. And yeah, I think it'd be kind of cool to learn.
Shelby, I just think it's great you're here because you're in the work that you're doing every day. You're doing the things that we want to talk about. And so I'm really excited to just kind of learn and gain a better understanding, and then to be able to share those things that you're finding that are working for you in the county and in your role. So I really appreciate you taking some time here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let me introduce Chief Ben Boeke, who's been the police chief for Oskaloosa, Iowa for the past 3 years after retiring from a department, Rockford Island Police Department, after spending 21 years of service in that department. He has extensive experience in community policing. In fact, Oskaloosa was recognized by getting the Community Policing Award in Iowa for communities larger than 10,000. So congratulations on that work, Chief. Chief Boeke was the executive officer of a 72-member mutual aid response team that specialized in mobile field force crowd control tactics. He's got his MBA in public administration, is currently going through more pain and is enrolled in a PhD program in criminal justice leadership. So congratulations on that and best of luck. He also does some adjunct instruction at William Penn University. And one of the interesting things about Chief Boeke is he's a certified shotgun coach for youth sports. Ben, thank you for spending some time with us. And I would love it if you would add a little bit more color to your background.
Thank you. I guess I'll start by saying I probably messed you up with my abbreviation. It's Rockford, Illinois, which is different than Rock Island. So yeah, Rockford was about 150,000, give or take. But I think when I sent that to you, I probably messed up the punctuation. Yeah, thanks for having me here. It's an honor to be here. I see a trend of 25 years in law enforcement. That's about what I have on now too. Just getting ready to complete 25 years. Definitely more pain with this doctoral program. I'm enjoying it. I'm learning some good things, and I hope to be teaching full-time sometime in retirement down the road. I don't have a timetable set on that yet, but yeah, I'm from Rockford, 150,000 people. I grew up there. Illinois is a different world compared to some other places, and I'm right next door, 4 hours away, but it's just night and day different. So as Chief Scott was talking about being the most beautiful place in the world, Iowa is what's called flyover country. Nobody really thinks much about Iowa until they're starting to eat or put fuel in their car, because we provide about 10% of the food for the world is the latest stat I saw for corn and ethanol production. So it's pretty impressive. We are fairly rural. We are about an hour from Des Moines, an hour and a half from Iowa City. So we are out in the middle of cornfields and bean fields and gravel roads, but we're a little jewel, kind of disconnected from the rest of the world, where we have really good community support. And some of that has been cultivated prior to us needing it, and some of it has been cultivated just by, everyone talks about Iowa nice, and Iowans just genuinely are nice people for the most part, and that sets us ahead a little bit with our community engagement. So
I think that's great. I've been to Iowa many times. My folks are from Southern Iowa, and there are a lot of beautiful spots in Iowa. And I'm thinking about the award that you got for your community policing work. That's not something that comes easy, and it really does depend upon a community that's supporting each other and doing a lot of things in the right way. And so I'm really excited to kind of learn more about what you have done and what you are doing in the community to kind of help build and support the quality of life that I'm sure you're enjoying there. So thanks a lot for being here today.
Thank you.
Well, let me just kind of kick off the topic. The topic of the presentation today is putting police needs and expectations into a community context. I was a city manager in the Minneapolis Twin Cities area for over 30 years before I joined this engagement world. And during the course of my career, I put such a high level of respect in the whole area of law enforcement. Law enforcement touches every aspect of a community's life, and it has just tons to do with maintaining quality life for folks who reside in businesses that operate in the community. It's such an important aspect of what local government provides. And expectations are just extremely high. I think for the most part, residents take for granted the public safety aspect of their community until they actually need your service. And so this notion of how do you connect with your residents on an ongoing basis so you've got meaningful engagement and you're building up those trust factors that I know you all appreciate the value of in just having the confidence of your residents in the work that you do. It's such a critical part of law enforcement. But that engagement piece is such an important aspect. And the other reality is that if you make a mistake, the impacts of that mistake are probably generational to that community. I mean, just think about some of the things that are going on around the world today and the civil unrest that we're all experiencing in various degrees or varying degrees. Police departments need to continue to adapt to overlapping challenges on the time. They're always evolving needs, and you also have organizational demands internally that you're contending with. And so this whole this whole notion of engagement in a 24/7 kind of a social media world is really something that I'm really hoping to hear more about how you kind of deal with it. You know, we have a tool that's called the National Police Services Survey, and it's really designed to get an overall community perspective of what resident sentiments are around local policing. This graph is really the results of 2 administrations of the MPSS. We did one in 2018 to a national audience of a couple thousand people, and then we repeated it in 2020 after all of the things that have happened during the last couple of years, just simply to measure the change in resident sentiment and resident confidence and trust in local police services. And you can see what resident priorities were and are as a result of this scientifically administered survey. And what a couple of the interesting things, I mean, the overall priorities remain the same, with school safety and security being at the top. And you can see the changes in the priority levels. But the 2 that actually increased in 2020 were those areas that involved building better connections between residents and police departments. You know, that whole notion of neighborhood police problem solving. There is an increased priority and an increased interest in building greater relationships between law enforcement agencies and people that are residing in the community. And so these kind of conversations are really important to just understand, how can you build a better and stronger engagement program with your residents that's going to be meaningful for accomplishing the things that you need to accomplish and moving your community forward, which everybody wants in any event. So there are 3 questions that we're going to be talking about today. The first one is, what role should the community play in guiding or influencing the delivery of local police services? The second one is, what strategies are you using for managing community expectations? Once you know what those expectations are, how do you manage them within the confines of resources that you have available and things that are acceptable within the community? And then finally, what tools and methods do you use for just understanding what resident needs are, as well as how do you kind of track your overall performance? So let's go ahead and get going on the questions. And Chief Scott, I'd like to talk to you first. Chief Scott, can you talk about the role that the community plays in guiding or influencing the delivery of police services in Haines?
Yeah, it's a pretty vital role. I think nationally we have 18,000 separate police agencies, all with their unique identity. And that identity needs to be defined by the community and the services that are provided by a law enforcement agency. I believe very strongly that in order for a community to exercise its constitutional rights and privileges, those rights and privileges are predicated on security. Arguably, you cannot exercise your rights if you are not in a secure environment. And fundamentally, that's what law enforcement agencies do. If a community is happy and healthy, then a community has a sphere of trust, what Lawrence Harrison called the radius of trust. And really, it's the only capital that we deal in. We deal in the capital of trust and support from our communities. And that radius of trust, that support, that political capital that we deal in, is non-existent if they don't have a hand in shaping how we enforce laws. There are some things at the state level that are statutorily required of us. We have very little say. But when you have a conversation with your community members and impart to them that those laws were built by your elected officials in your state Senate and state House, they start to understand that they have a hand in how we enforce, when we enforce, and why we enforce. Our agency in Haines, Alaska, I've described to colleagues around the country as a quality of life agency. People are here because it's a beautiful environment. They want to live in Alaska. They want to live independently. And their expectations for our agency is that we will support their quality of life, that we are not overly heavy-handed. We have the benefit of living in a very safe environment, probably one of the safest in the States, probably one of the safest in the country when it gets right down to it. And I think that is based largely at how we respond to calls at the tactical level. We have a very old world approach. We don't use a lot of technology. We use the benefits of built relationships that span decades. And those relationships are built within our Chamber of Commerce, within our legislative body locally, within our Public Safety Commission. And that radius of trust is expanded because we do things in a very old world format. We talk and interface with the public as they demand it. And our officers in this agency understand, because we live in a small community, we're going to be stopped in the grocery store. We're going to be stopped at the doctor's office. We're going to be stopped at the DMV, and we're going to be asked questions. And they give their time and they give their entire commitment in communicating. What our expectations are in serving them. And it's really as simple as that. It's not a terribly complex idea. And I think the reason that it works, again, I'll go back to my introduction. I came from a fairly large department in a fairly dense metropolitan city that was dealing with significant issues and still is to this day. But when you break things down to a small environment with a small group of individuals that have to provide solutions, it becomes so much easier. It becomes so much easier when you know everyone in your community. Now, our community is fairly small in the grand scale of things, but Alaska's economy is based on somewhat of a three-legged stool. We're a resource extraction state, so we deal in fuel, we deal in mining, and we deal in fish. Our community is somewhat heavily invested in the fisheries. We are looking at investing in the mining, and because we are in the Southeast, we are invested in tourism. So we'll see our community at times plus up by double and sometimes triple given an event. And because we create such a unique environment and a unique experience, we have absolutely zero problems with people visiting our community because we've established a baseline that allows them to enjoy this environment and recognize that we're providing for the quality of life.
Yeah, that's great. You've mentioned a couple of things that are kind of uniform. I mean, you're in such a unique environment. And you described it really, really well in terms of how you connect and engage with your residents and the role that they played. A couple of things that I just want to kind of highlight and see if you have any quick thoughts about. One is the aspect of trust. I think we all understand the value of trust in delivery of services. The other is those community partnerships that you look to the leadership in a community to help you kind of run the community, right? And have a good understanding of what those expectations are. Just the way that you engage and operate within your community to understand what the residents' needs are. I just think those are really universal across jurisdictions, regardless of where you're located or how big you are, or whether you're a city or a county. It just strikes me that you have established a culture in your community that really provides for that level of public safety. The other point you brought up, which I think is really valid, is the fact that a lot of times people take for granted the work that you do. And so by having those ongoing interactions with people and reminding them that they elect the people who make decisions that impact their quality of life, I think that's a really important message. And so I really appreciate that. And I don't know if you have any follow-up comments. It's really just kind of my summary of what I heard you say.
Well, the one thing that I'll point out just a brief follow-up is, you had mentioned some of the turmoil that's going on in the country right now, specifically around law enforcement. And if there's one benefit that I could point to, or one takeaway from this interesting time that we're living in, is our citizens, our community members, and the citizens of this country are able to witness in those large metropolitan areas that are having turmoil, and trying to diminish the role of law enforcement in their community. They're getting to see minute by minute through news stories, the AP, how that's affecting the citizens in those environments. And really, some of the things that's happening in large metropolitan cities right now are going to take decades to recover from.
Generational.
And it's very important. Government, we often say it, that government works slowly, purposefully. It's because large impacts can be made with swift knee-jerk reactions. And some of the turmoil that's going on really is going to take a profoundly long time and probably increase budgets to resolve. And furthermore, the dilemma is really culturally. There is some impact on how law enforcement can affect environments. And what we're seeing today is we're seeing that young people don't want to enter the industry. They want to commit themselves to other jobs. And some communities are not seeing the relevance that public safety plays in their everyday lives. And I think the benefit to that is seeing the impact that these positions are having on these local communities. Yeah. And really what they're doing is we're a battleship. It takes time to turn. It's a very slow moving process. When you do it incorrectly, it is very detrimental. But when you do it correctly, it can be beneficial for our communities into our children and grandchildren's eras.
Yeah, that's very well said. Really appreciate that perspective. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Shelby, can you talk about the role that the community plays in guiding or influencing police services or sheriff services in Kent County?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of going off what Chief said, that, I think too, it's about what we set as a standard for our sheriff's office or for your city, in the fact that having a mission statement and our strategic goals and operational goals within our sheriff's office. And, with our mission statement is to preserve and protect the safety and security of not only all of our residents in Kent County, but also have a safe and secure correctional facility. Just because we also are a sheriff's office, we have to also be a part, or we're also part of our correctional facility that we also had to provide. We play a huge role in the fact that right now what our sheriff is kind of talking about is being a servant to your community. We're really big into service right now, to provide a service, what you can do within your community that is going to make you be the best of your ability to even come work for the sheriff's office. I think it takes a special person to do our job. And I think as long as you have a desire and a heart and dedication in order to do that, the community sees that. And if the community sees that with the type of officers that we're hiring, they're going to support us here at the sheriff's office. The way we do that is with inmate service programs that we have here. So we have their GED programs that they can graduate from inside the jail that we work with, or spiritual programs that they have suggested wanting to be inside the jail, as well as our performance measures. Our performance measures for our sheriff's office here, we provide to everyone. It's out on our website, and it provides our priority one calls, our community program effectiveness, the use of force that we have here at our sheriff's office, to kind of show where that standard was at the past year to where it is now and the changes that we have made. We're kind of moving, I think, towards not only still being able to obviously have a conversation with someone and presenting, because I feel like sometimes that's lost, especially with my generation, that, you know, communicating now is a huge factor instead of just having it be over the phone. You know, it's getting out and stepping out and talking to someone in your community and going to township meetings, which is what our community policing unit here is all about. We're in those township meetings, listening to all the board members, deciding what their community or township wants in order what we can do to help them, whether it's setting them up with our app, because we're kind of moving towards a more, I would say, electronic base or an advancement of technology in our area. So our app has, you know, just as simple as what traffic is like in the morning to if there's something going on in your township neighborhood that you should know about. With the app, we also provide programs like events that are going on within the community. And, you know, we need our community in order to attend those events, in order to, you know, be aware of what the problem is. A good event for that is our Coffee with the Deputy that we host in several different townships and our area, that we meet once a week for about an hour. I feel like now it's more like 2 because everyone's kind of got to know each other and be friends. And so, you know, but at first we'll talk about, you know, whether there's stolen vehicles or larcenies or whatever that is inside the township, to them moving to just being a human being and talking about community relationships and, you know, what that is for our sheriff's office or what it is that our community needs. We are very, very involved in our community here for the sheriff's office, and they're highly involved with us with doing surveys or being able to have a QR code that they can tell us, hey, yeah, this training was great, but what more is it that we can improve on, or what more you'd like to see from us? We provide the QR code on our app and also on business cards, which is great because they can just have that and take it back to their community members as well. Yeah, I think it's just all about here for us. I mean, it's huge. Our community plays such a huge role in being a part of what we do. And we're blessed that our community, you know, loves us doing these events. It's just kind of like when we had National Night Out, which I know is a nationwide event. And we were able to do it in 3 locations in our county with over hundreds of people that came to each specific one. And that's something that we have a ton of fun with every year. And we're able to do that, but with our community, because they get to come out and participate in that event with us.
Shelby, do you have a sense during the course of the last year and a half, do you have a sense for whether or not your engagement levels have gone up or gone down?
Yeah, so they have definitely gone up. Our engagement levels have been huge, especially with, I think, you know, with COVID. I know a lot of people were obviously not able to come out and participate, but we, you know, changed, you know, then that's where we have to change, right? So I just use National Night Out because that's something that we changed for being a drive-through parade now with a whole bunch of different you know, fire trucks or ambulances or people within the community come and still have that drive-through parade, because we have to adapt, right, to every situation that kind of comes our way. And they totally supported us in that. And that was something that we were very grateful for.
Yeah, that's cool. You're doing a lot of cool stuff around engagement, and sounds like you got a lot of stuff going on. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Chief Boeke, love to learn what you think about the role that the community plays in influencing the delivery of police services in Oskaloosa.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, I started in law enforcement in '97, and maybe not everywhere, but where I was at that point in time, we had gotten away from proactive policing. We had become almost a unit unto ourselves, separate from the community that we served. And that's how I grew up in policing, and that didn't feel very good. And so over the years, I've come to realize through education and just through my own experiences that we are part of that community. We have to be part of that community, and we have to be forming community partnerships. In one thing that my guys here probably get tired of me saying is we have to be doing this fight before we need it. We have to be proactive and build those relationships before we need them. And when I first got here 3 years ago, I heard some pretty disheartening comments about our relationship in the community, our relationship with our local university. And that was one of the first things I tackled before we needed it, so that when COVID hit and everything shut down and people were out of work and there was a lot going on within the community that scared people, because we're not in a big city, we're kind of separate, and things can be very different in a more rural area. We were ahead of the game, and people knew they could rely on us for that. So that's how we have tried to, in small town rural Iowa, we've tried to change things around so that, as Shelby said, which was perfectly said, we are servants, and we are servants for our community in so many ways. It's not just law enforcement. It is providing community leadership in a servant leadership type of way, so that no matter what's going on, our community can call on us and say, hey, there's something wrong. I don't know how to solve it, but I know that you guys will know and help me through it. So I'm just going to call and leave it in your hands, and we know it'll be taken care of. That was a huge thing that I was able to do here that I wasn't necessarily able to do in Illinois, because in Illinois, we had a large city with 10 patrol areas with 10 community service officers. That's not enough to effectively communicate what's going on. Here, I have 17 officers in a small community, 17 community service officers, and they all know the expectation for that. And they accept that. The people that I'm bringing in here, in our initial interviews, we're talking about servants to the community and how they want to help the community. It's not just about law enforcement. You still get some of these young people, they just want to go out there and write tickets and take people to jail. But most of the people we're seeing now, they know it's about being community servants, not just taking people to jail. It's the other 90% of the job that they really want to do. And yes, they'll take people to jail, and yes, they'll write tickets and do the traditional law enforcement role, but it's the everything else that the community starts to rely on us to do.
I'm so glad that you brought up the notion of being proactive in this engagement world, because the idea of building those connections before you actually find yourself in the middle of a storm. That is such a valid and true statement. And it sounds like you have been doing that just with great success in Oskaloosa, in terms of just building that engagement so that you've got that trust factor that Chief Scott talked about. You're building it up before you need it, so that when you do need it, you've got those connections and that engagement, and that trust factor stays with you. And so I'm really glad that you brought that up. Very well said. I really appreciate that perspective. Let's switch over to the second question. And Shelby, I'd like to start with you. Shelby, can you talk about the strategies that the county is using for managing community expectations? It's one thing to understand what expectations are, but then it's another thing to be able to manage them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have we have a school resource officer in about every single school in our area that we have right now. On top of that, we also have a community policing unit, which is about 7 of us, including a community policing canine. So with that being said, we I feel like start not only with our road patrol, right? That's being proactive, like Chief said, and going out and making contacts with the community. Now we're putting community officers in that community. So now we're going to talk business to business, seeing what they need, whether it's getting them not only on our app, but getting them on a different app in case for a retail fraud, right? That they can all communicate together, that directly communicates with us. But going out and seeing what those certain businesses need, as well as kids at school, right? Because that's where we're starting from, especially with our young generation, and developing a core relationship with children to be able to go out from there and bringing them back home to families, and knowing that, again, what Chief said, that they can trust us. From there, some of the programs I know I've kind of already stated, but with our app that we're using, that we highly, highly push out, as well as online reporting, we want everybody to be able to not only have that a high technology base, but also be able to talk to us as well. So that's why we put those community resource officers in those certain townships. with our strategies that we try to do too is with our strategic plan, we try to bring down our, our priority one calls. So whether it's contractually, we're putting in more cars in certain townships that we need, or we're making more district cars so we can respond to those priority one calls sooner. With that being said, we have in our north part of our township, our county is split up into 4 different areas. The north part, we patrol 8 townships, which to get from one end to the other is about 45 minutes. So it is massive. So we try to, serve our north end of the county more to be able to respond to those high priority calls. With our strategies, we also use our website. If it's not our website, we are using our events as a means of communication, for example, with Coffee with the Deputy or Shop with the Sheriff, which is something we do, around Christmas time, that we are able to take children from the community that might need a little bit more something during Christmas and being able to go shopping with them, which is, if you haven't done that, which I'm sure both chiefs have here, it's an unbelievable experience. We just really pride ourselves in our community outreach with especially Instagram and Facebook. Right now, it's a generation that we're connecting through, both of those, and possibly TikTok. I've been possibly getting on having a TikTok here at the Kent County Sheriff's Office, because we have to start with, or grow up, I should say, with our generations, right? Because it's not always just connecting through the phone now. It might be through social media and our Instagram and Facebook. So I think responding back is also important. If you were going to have those social networks, responding back to people who message you or who file a complaint or need something, it's important that you respond back to them, because that's also how we build that transparency with the community. Because if we don't do that, then how do they trust us? So that's just a lot of different current events and things that we do here that we definitely pride ourselves on.
Yeah, I am impressed by kind of the multitude of ways that you're reaching out to the community to make sure that they're understanding what you're delivering, what your challenges are. Those connections help to manage those expectations for sure. And I'm kind of intrigued about the use of TikTok. I'm glad you brought that up, because people should be exploring that. Don't talk to me about it. I know the value. I still don't know it all yet. Well, but you're right. It's really important to pay attention to how do you connect with and manage the expectations of the younger generation, because that is becoming more and more important in every location. So thank you for that. That was really good. Chief Boeke, can you talk about the strategies that you're using for managing community expectations in Oskaloosa?
Sure. That's pretty easy for me. When I got here, we were primarily a Facebook police department. That was all we got involved in. And we had about 3,000 followers for a community of about 11,500. So we were not reaching out very well. When I saw things on there, it was mostly about what officers are doing, sometimes off duty. It was about promotions and things like that, but it wasn't really community outreach as I knew it. So we reached out to Twitter and Instagram and kind of connected on different ways, LinkedIn a little bit. But our community still loves Facebook primarily. I haven't had a lot of outreach that has reached good people and gotten good feedback from any other. And I guess I'll just say we're not on TikTok, and my daughter can spend hours on TikTok, but our community is not primarily looking for information from us on TikTok. We're up to almost 9,000 followers now on Facebook. And we've changed it around. We do put out a little bit about what our officers are doing so they can get to know us. But we're small town, just like in Haines, we're small town. People know us. People know us at the grocery store. They know us everywhere we go. So every time we're out there, it's, hey, I have a question for you. They feel comfortable coming up to us, and more often than not, that's what happens. They've been holding on to these questions until they see us. They know they're going to see us. They know we're approachable. So now it's become on Facebook. We use Facebook to look for wanted people. So if there are people that commit crimes at Walmart or crimes at one of our local drugstores, and we have good video, we'll put screenshots out there, and our community treats that as a competition to see how fast they can identify these people, and then go on their Facebook page and figure out, oh, hey, they're wearing the same shirt and they got the same tattoo and the same hat, and they'll give us all that information. I think the record we've had is about 5 minutes before we've had somebody identified, and our community loves that, and they message us privately sometimes they just go ahead and put it out there. But our community, I think right now, has a very good understanding of what our expectations are. We are not just the stereotypical revenue generators for the city. If we're getting complaints about things, about people parking across sidewalks or parking in their yards, just silly things that we could go out and write a $10 ticket for, instead of just doing that, we put it out on Facebook so people understand, oh, hey, the expectation is that we don't do that. So maybe they can just eliminate that before it's a problem and before it's an enforcement issue, because we don't care about the revenue. The revenue goes to the city, and sometimes that's important. But one of the things that some people don't understand is if we're looking at our police departments as revenue generators in any way, shape, or form for budget that we're going to actually allocate, we're already going the wrong direction. Our publics don't expect that anymore. They don't want that. There is a place for writing tickets and things like that, but that is not the expectation that the public has, and we have to battle that all the time. People still talk about quotas, even though in law enforcement we don't talk about quotas. People still talk about, oh, you're just doing this because you need to make a certain number of arrests, or you need to write so many dollars worth of tickets. And everyone knows that's not really the case. And we put that out there quite often. That doesn't matter. We're trying to deflect some of these issues before we have to write tickets, before we have to make arrests. And our community loves it. They love the outreach on Facebook. And I kind of wish we could have a Twitter, Instagram following, but we just really don't. Even with the young generation, they're not into that. They know that everyone else is following on Facebook, and the good community comments are on Facebook. So they're on Facebook with us.
I think that's great. And I'm glad you brought that up. That's a unique approach that people are probably doing, but they're probably doing it with less intentionality than you are, and using Facebook for building. I mean, going from 3,000 to 9,000, wow, that's a huge increase. And it sounds like that mechanism or that tool is really helping you to lay out expectations, which then allows you to manage those expectations. And so I think that's really neat. Yeah, congratulations on it.
And I'm quite honestly quite surprised by that. I really thought the younger generation with Twitter and Instagram would really embrace that more. Not in our community. People are following it on Facebook because that's where the majority of the followers are, and they love the comments and they love arguing different things on our Facebook page, and then we can get on and maybe moderate a little bit or answer some questions. And it's just, we do a lot of in-person, but that's a really good non-in-person way to do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. Chief Scott, I'd love to hear what strategies you're using in Haines for managing community expectations.
Sure. I think the first place I'd start is in the hiring process. We have to make sure that we hire people that are appropriate to enforce the laws within our community, and that are going to start from day one with a high level of trust. Not only that, and this is something that I've thought of in the last several years, and we have two great examples in Deputy Humphries and Chief Boeke. We don't need to hire just people that are good for our communities. We need to hire at this time people that are good for the profession. And that's extremely important, because most police officers are not going to spend their entire career in one department. I'm a good example of that. I enjoy challenges. I want to go to unique environments, and I want to fix problems. And that's how I'm built. So hiring is one of the most important public engagements that you can do. And if we do it correctly, and we hire somebody that's good for the profession, the benefits are going to span decades, especially if they stay in the job. Even if they don't stay in the job, they're going to be an advocate for our profession to countless members of their family, people that they are close to, and we're going to build advocacy that way. And then into some of the more traditional means, we use social media. a great deal. I was surprised that my community also seems to coalesce around Facebook, regardless of what application is out there. That's what they choose to use. We utilize print media and radio. We have anonymous reporting tools and mass notification tools for emergencies that people are able to report back anonymous events to us, and that seems somewhat beneficial. But the goal through all of this is for our agency and our mission to blend into the community. And if we do it right, that mission is woven into the community, so they see us not as a particular entity that enforces the law, but a particular entity that's responsible for the community's well-being.
That's a great way to say that. You become part of the community, and it's not enforcement of laws. It's really just helping to build the culture and the environment. Is that a fair way to repeat?
I think so. I think so much of the problems that we see in larger metropolitan areas and around the country right now are relative to cultural identity and how we see ourselves as individuals.
Yeah. Do you have a difficulty at all in finding good candidates?
Not at this point. When I came to the department, it was initially a very trying time. The budget was less than adequate. The staffing had very high attrition rates. We were seeing people that would be onboarded and go through the training pipeline and leave very early, and that was terribly costly. We weren't building in institutional knowledge that was necessary in developing trust. And this isn't something that I accomplished solely. This is a team of individuals working together. I take a very democratic approach to things, and at times there's a need to be autocratic, but I see those very rarely in this environment. And we work on each other's strengths, and I think that's helped. And I have believed my entire career that most people that go in this industry don't come into it to be compensated at a high level. They come into it because they have a desire to serve and they want to support their communities. And the way that we try and emphasize that is through professional development. We want to make them the absolute best that they can be, to the point Chief Boeke made of being proactive, seeing problems before they materialize, expanding your range of thought, your range of concepts, to being prepared for things that are going to come down the road in your community, and developing your people to be complex problem solvers that can address those situations.
Yeah,
we kind of deal with really unique problems in this profession, more so than ever before. You know, homelessness is not a law enforcement issue. Mental health is not a law enforcement issue, but we see those every day. And our people are in the throes of it. And our people are the ones that carry that yoke and have to solve some of those situational events and get those people pointed in the direct service areas. And it's very trying at times. And I think that's largely why you see high attrition rates right now, is because we're at a point of critical mass where we've been given so many unique problems to deal with, and there are not clear answers to them. And it takes a creative thinker, it takes a dynamic approach to resolving these issues. And it's not for everybody. And it's daily, it's hourly, in fact.
Yep. No, I totally appreciate that. I'm glad that you shared that with us. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Chief Boeke, can you talk about the tools and methods that you're using for, number one, understanding what your residents are expecting and where their priorities are, but also how you're kind of tracking your performance?
Yeah, performance tracking is kind of an everyday thing. I'm in the office where I get the phone calls when people are unhappy, and sometimes managing those expectations is extremely important. People don't always understand. We live in a world where for 20, 30 years, people have been watching policing on TV and online, and they think they have an understanding of what we do and why we do it. And as we in the business know, what you see online is not at all what we deal with. It leaves out all the paperwork side of things, and it shows just the exciting moments where we see an officer who just barely avoided being killed, and what a heroic thing. And those of us in the business are watching that going, well, I was really lucky he didn't get killed, because that was a really huge mistake he made that we all see and the public doesn't see. So we have to be talking to people all the time. And Shelby mentioned coffee with a deputy and things like that. We've tried that. We did not have a great return on investment, I guess I would say, for that. The community here, they know us well enough. They don't want to come have coffee with us because they know they'll see us at the grocery store. They'll see us at Walmart. So trying to get them to take time off of their day. We got a few retired folks that came in, but other than that, it was really hard to find people that wanted to spend that time because they knew we were accessible any other time that they wanted to talk to us. Managing expectations for us. When I got here, as I mentioned before, we had a reputation problem within our community. And it wasn't like you see in some of the larger cities. It was just an undertone of, yeah, all they do is write a lot of tickets and all they do is this. And, in rural Iowa, we are still fairly homogeneous. We all look the same in rural Iowa, but then we have a very diverse worldwide university in our town. So we have to manage those expectations every 4 years as new students are coming in. We have to make sure that we are on board with that. So that's why I approached the university right at the beginning. Hey, if you need someone to instruct some criminology classes, I'm here for you. I want to have contact with those students so that when the rumors are floating around, they can say, no, Chief Boeke's my instructor. We talk to him every day. We know that's not the case. We know. And then the students are some of our best cheerleaders for what we have going on. And so I've been doing that for a little over a year now, and it has caused a night and day difference in how we deal with things. I have on my calendar, I'm just sitting here looking at it, August 20th is our move-in day for our university. Well, generally for move-in day, what we do is we in uniform, in marked police cars, are out talking to the parents as they're moving their students into the dorms, handing out ice water, things like that, answering questions and talking to these kids about, hey, what do you want to do here? Have you ever been to Iowa before? I had kids last year from Peru, from Rwanda, from South Africa, from all over the world that come to small town Iowa and they think they have a clue what they're in for, and they don't. So part of those managing expectations and residents' expectations is we just get out in front of it and try and cut that fuse a little bit so it doesn't become an issue. And I can't tell you the number of parents who they're amazed that the chief of police and our community service officer and some of our officers are just out helping these kids move into their dorms and talking to them and getting to know them a little bit so that they already see a friendly, familiar face in uniform on day one when they get here. And that's a big tool that we've had to use.
Do you go through an annual strategic planning process or any kind of a regular long-term planning effort?
Oh, yeah, good question. It's on my board behind me for strategic planning. Our comprehensive plan for the city is due for a 20-year overhaul. We're going to start working on that here this fall. And then once we've moved forward, yes, we will have strategic planning for the department. My issue, so we've got 17 members on our department, 17 sworn. I've hired 10 of those since I've been here in 3 years. So we are a very young department, and my goals have had to be get them on board, train them, put them in the environment, make sure they know my expectations. And the strategic planning has to kind of take a back seat to that right now until we get up to full speed. I'm in the middle of a restructure also. When I got here, it was chief and 4 lieutenants and a bunch of officers, and we're actually implementing sergeants here in the next couple of months. We tested last week. So supervision is a critical portion of what we do in policing nowadays. We have a good relationship with our community right now, but if we don't supervise properly and we drop the ball on that, it's going to affect us for decades sometimes So we need to take this opportunity to restructure and really make sure, while I trust my guys and they're out doing a great job, we need to make sure, and we're verifying that with proper supervision as well.
Yeah, totally appreciate that. There's a few things on, I think, the plates of most police chiefs around the country, just given the challenges of the last year and a half and everything that's in front of you. So thanks very much. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Chief Scott, can you talk about the tools that and methods that you're finding successful in helping you to understand what your residents' needs are and their priorities, as well as how you're tracking your performance?
Sure. You know, one of the things that they tell you when you start getting into a command slot is don't get caught behind the desk. And it's extremely true. And it is a struggle to get away from the magic box in front of you and to get away from your desk. One of the things I somewhat pride myself is, you know, I still go on calls. I'm a working chief. I've always enjoyed the job and interacting with people. And it's one thing to manage from a desk, and it's another to manage in the environment with the officers side by side. Last night, I went on a priority call with an officer, and I was up till 2 a.m. It has to be necessary. The citizens have to see you, and your officers have to be able to rely on you. But it is extremely vital in understanding what your officers, what your dispatchers, what your jailers, or the environments that they're working in. And you have to understand the vernacular they use and the situations that they find themselves in to support them, to be that servant leader.
Do you go through any kind of formal strategic long-term planning processes in Haines?
We have, and we've attempted to do it. Our community is rather brutal to our executive management. We've gone through something like 12 borough managers in 13 years. The average stay is less than 18 months, and some of them have successfully beaten that. So it's been very hard from a stabilization standpoint. It's been very tough on department heads to not have stable management and process. And some of our strategic planning has not been where it should be as a result of that. But that speaks to kind of where we are in our environment nationally. There's, you know, it seems like most communities when it comes to politics are evenly divided. And often the people at the top really suffer because gone are the days of communities having patience and wanting to see the long approach to problem solving. They want immediate impact, and they want to be able to discuss it, and they want to have opinions about it. And really, I think the average stay right now nationally for a police chief is 3 years. That's terribly short when you think about it. I mean, when I started as a police chief, it took me 3 years to get my feet under me. It's just a lot to take on. It's a lot of responsibility. There are political elements. There's a whole dynamic between communication and addressing and supporting staff. I mean, there are so many dilemmas that we deal with daily. But I think that there is benefit at supporting the tactical level and understanding your community, understanding the problems that your officers and deputies are seeing.
Yeah, I resonate with what you're saying. 30 years as a city manager, I've been in that seat. And I think you're right. I think you're seeing it correctly. But I can also say, and love you kind of get your thoughts on this. When you have alignment with where you're going and alignment with the people who are elected as well as your staff, a community can just literally move mountains. When you are not in alignment, or when you have that turnover in that less than stable environment, then it becomes really, really challenging, not only as a community, but as an organization, right? Just the internal relationships really become strained.
Absolutely. The benefit through strategic planning is it's a shared responsibility at that point. You've detailed those things that are important to you and the community. and you're all lifting together. When you don't have it, it's, every day is a crapshoot.
Yeah.
You tend to have emotion and adversity leading you, as opposed to, conscious thought and deliberate effort.
Yeah, very true. Thanks so much for sharing that. I appreciate
You're welcome.
it. Yeah. Shelby, can you talk about the tools and methods that you're using for understanding resident expectations and priorities, and how you're tracking or how your department is tracking their performance?
Yeah, absolutely. I know I've kind of mentioned already, but we do have a strategic plan that we have done now for a while, that we do post on our website, in our app, for every single community member in our townships, or just community member in general that we have in our county, is order to see where we have performed, maybe where we lack, but where we're trying to get better at. As well as our performance measures. We have that too. So it's two different things. They kind of combined into one, but our performance measures is just a little bit different, and showing in a graph like how we have performed in our use of force, whether that's up or down, or our 911 calls, and whether that's up or down, and how those are answered. When we're talking about the strategies, we kind of go into our field being diversity, right? We need to have diversity in our field in order to serve everyone. With that being said, we have a Citizens Police Academy where we welcome people from the community to come on in and be a part of our police department for X amount of weeks, in order to learn about exactly how we do things here, why we do things here, in order to take back to the community and explain what those things are. On top of that, this year we've added, with diversity, added what we call the Latina X Academy. So now we're hosting an entire academy in Spanish for Hispanics, Latinos, Mexicans, everybody to come in order to be able to learn what we do, but in order to have it in their native language, which is awesome. All this that we have put together this year, especially with deputies that we have here that do speak Spanish, that can correlate with them. Goes along with our strategy and our video production team too. We've created a video production team that now we can be transparent with the community and put out body camera footage, so we can show an incident right away and have a good relationship with the media in order to, show what's going on, or what happened in our critical incident, or what that situation was. Which I would say kind of leads into our training, which our sheriff here highly stresses on, that we have to have training, right? Because if we don't have training and our people aren't trained correctly, how do we perform within our community? It's from the tactical level, as Chief said, and also I would say from the de-escalation level, which we're seeing, mostly now with the way our law enforcement kind of career has changed. But we have to adapt too. So with adapting to that, offering training as well to schools, whether we train, which we call CRAZE, so which is a critical incident or active shooter, as well as stop the bleed. So medical, how do you put a tourniquet on? How do you stop a wound? With safety in schools, I think those programs are necessary, and it's kind of funny when people call us to ask for that training, because they're like, is it, how much do we owe you? And we're like, no. Like, we train our deputies to come do this for free. And this is what our unit is about, especially with just coming in and doing surveys of how your building can get better in the community, and how we can better serve you even in a church with church security. I mean, we are kind of all over the board, which is awesome. But we like having that diversity, because that's what encompasses our community. Just being involved in a little bit of everything, which you can see, I'm sure the two chiefs here with Special Olympics, which a lot of the law enforcement community is involved in. So we're, plugging into that community to be able to be, involved with them. And also the mental health community. We have a mental health crisis team now. So now when our deputies are out on the road, they can call that mental health crisis team and have them come out to deal with a mental crisis that might be going on in this house that we just can't connect with that person. which is great that we've developed all these different teams and specialty units. And just like both chiefs have done so much with their careers, and as I'm hoping to do too, that's the diversity as well. It's not just staying in one position like I am in the community outreach team right now. It is moving around and seeing different aspects of how our county works. And that's why I feel really blessed being in this position, because I'm able to answer these questions because I kind of know now how, our sheriff's office works, or what our goals are and our organization operational goals are, and what we can do to get there. And it might not be quickly, but we're getting there. And that's exactly what matters. But we also need the community's help in return, and also to get there, and not it just be us. So I think that's super important as well. And I guess the last kind of thing I have is starting at the top and working down to the bottom. I could call any single supervisor I have here and they would answer any question I have. And I think that shows something about your department, because if your department is working well on the inside, it's going to work phenomenal on the outside. And I think you have to have that, and knowing and trusting and, believing for our sheriff. So Michelle LaJoy Young, I could easily ask her a question and no doubt she's going to come back with a response, and have a response to everybody, kind of with what we saw with COVID or what we saw with the riots this year. She was there supporting us, which made us feel, that we had her support. And I think that's huge, especially with new recruits coming in to this field. They want that connection, just like with Chief being in the police academy and teaching. They want to see those connections in order to realize, okay, yeah, I've had her or him as a teacher, and, they can say nothing but good things about Kent County and how the professionalism is and what we do here. So I think that's super, super important.
Yeah. It's just really awesome to hear you talk about all of the different ways that you're engaging. I really applaud you for doing your academies in serving the Latino population. And that's really cool. I mean, that helps to build that alumni that supports the organization going forward, and thinking creatively outside the box on how you are engaging. You just got a lot of cool things going on. And I appreciate the fact that you got a strategic plan in place. You've got performance measures. Does the department itself do any kind of annual survey work around your performance?
We do a little bit, yes. And that's kind of with those surveys that have on just our app, or that people can get on and read our strategic plan and go through and, see maybe what they want differently, or where we are lacking. Like we knew we were lacking in our North units, where we had to, divide it somehow, where we could have our response be quicker to our priority one calls, especially it being priority one calls. And that was something that we really, really wanted to improve on this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Very cool. That's great. Well, thank you. This has been a great conversation. I really have appreciated everything that all of you have shared. Do any of you have any additional comments that you want to make, or do you have questions for each other at all on anything? I know we're past our hour-long period, but I'd certainly love to get your perspectives.
I can jump in real quick. I want to say that I'm very impressed with Deputy Humphries. She's obviously got that excited attitude for the job that some of us maybe have toned down a little bit over the years. It's just great to see. I mean, you're the future of law enforcement. You're exactly what we need to see coming up through the ranks. And people like you are what I'm hoping to leave behind as I leave law enforcement the next decade or so. So it's just really heartening and exciting to see that, because in this day and age with where we are in law enforcement, you don't always see that excitement. And you haven't talked about law enforcement at all. You've talked about everything else you have going on. And that's really where we're at. I mean, we're 90% everything else and maybe 10% law enforcement. So that's great to see. I appreciate meeting you.
Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. It's great to see passionate people, especially in a profession that's mired in controversy right now. When I turn on the TV and I watch the nightly news, I get to hear the talking chiefs from around the country. I've long said, man, if you want to understand the tempo and environment in a police department, ask a sergeant, ask a young person. They'll let you know, and they won't have the politically correct nomenclature that a chief may have. They'll give it to you straight. So it's good to hear young people that are entering the profession with such passion.
Thank you.
Keep it up.
It was super funny. I was talking to Matt before this, and I was actually on the phone with my sergeant, who I replaced in the unit that I'm in right now. And I was like, oh my God, I'm meeting with these chiefs. Like, are all these answers right? Because I was like, does this sound okay? Like, I was like, I did my research. This is our strategic plan, right?
You got a great future ahead of you. Keep it up.
Thank you.
That's just wonderful. This has been really a great panel conversation. There were a couple of really cool things that I heard. I mean, for all the times that I've been doing these panels, I really love the way that you all have talked about, and I think Chief Boeke, Chief Scott, you have identified it, and Shelby described it really well. It's not about law enforcement, it's about how you engage and become part of the community, and in serving and becoming kind of a fabric of providing for the well-being of the community. I think that the way that you all articulated that was just so great and so cool. All of you are doing really neat things in your own environments on how you're engaging and how you're building that culture of support and that culture of trust in what are truly these kind of trying times. So I just really appreciate all of your thoughts on what you're doing and how you're sharing and how you're building strong communities in your environment. So thank you so much for doing what you're doing in your community and on behalf of the residents, and for sharing your ideas today. I'm going to follow up this webinar with I'll send you an email which gives you the contact information. Shelby, you can use it, or these other chiefs can use it for recruitment purposes, or they have your email address. So, but just so that you can connect with each other if you want to follow up on any particular topics. I do these every week. The benefit for me is I get the value of meeting new people every week, and I really find just great value in that. But if you know of anybody that you think would do a good job with these kind of conversations, send them my way. I'd love to get them integrated into this panel and get their perspectives as well. You'll start seeing these panel conversations show up on LinkedIn probably within a week or so. We take these highlight segments, and so you'll get your question and the response. And we publish them on LinkedIn, and we simply ask that you share them with your networks as well. That, there's a lot of people that look to you with respect and want to know what you're doing. And so it's really helpful for you to share that on your own LinkedIn pages. But I thank you for spending the last hour and a half with us and together, and hope you have found it worthwhile and a worthwhile way to spend your time. The stuff you've shared has been just super. And so thank you for spending the time.
Could I just make one final request here before I sign off?
Absolutely.
One thing I learned about halfway through my career is I am built for teaching. Teaching just works with me in a lot of different ways. And I have seen through the educational process, there are a lot of people out there instructing who have never invested in this job. They're teaching the next generation, but they don't really understand what we do. And I would just make a request for all law enforcement professionals: get out there and teach. Figure out either in an academy, in a community college, in a university, get out there and teach. We owe it to our next generation to teach them from our experience, not just from a book. It's going to be critically important in the next 20 or 30 years. So I would just tell everybody, if you have that ability, and even if you don't know you have the ability, you probably do, go out and find some people to teach about law enforcement. It is critically important.
Yeah, and Chief Boeke, I really appreciated your comment on your instructional experience, where in addition to teaching, you're building those relationships, and that's such a valuable part of that as well. So thank you for that.